It's episode 203, and we're still with the Professor, the Werecat, Fairy Foxglove, Will, Fenrir, Giants, Goblins, Change. It's just going on. It's just all kicking off, and it's all going to kick off this week. Just big thank you to everyone who follows us and likes us and reviews us and stuff like that. It's really important. If you've got enough time in the day and you don't mind being a lunatic, then please review us. It would be really, really welcome. Helps out the show. And have a look at the description. There's loads of goodies in there to have a look at and see what there is and thingy bubbles. So go for it. I think that's about it. Yeah, let's get on with the show. Bye.
The Professor. Well, after the embarrassment of falling over in too much kit in the last episode, I have to really consider what I need for this bloody task. The issue that I have is that I like to be prepared for, a mission? A job? What do you want to call it? A task? A thingy, and I have no idea what we're walking into. No bloody idea at all. I've learnt over the years, no, that's not the case. Let's crank that up a notch. The centuries. That you need to be prepared for all eventualities that, well, what's the modern military parlance for this? Contact. Yes, that's it. That contact can make. Sadly, in this case, I have no idea what I'm going to contact on the other side of that blank magical portal that sits and sizzles in the air before me. That is an issue. An utterly colossal issue, and I'm not bloody willing to risk popping the old noggin through there and taking a gander without being ready. Reassuringly, I will have a very pretty and very lethal weapon with me. That very weapon was standing and looking at me at this very moment. It was Vaunt, the werecat. And she was pretty. Lethal, and always silent. Even with this killer on my side, I was concerned because I had no idea what we were walking into. I know I keep harping on about this state of affairs, but it's a rare circumstance in this day and age of intel and profiling. Even in the world of the unknown, which is my specific workplace, the modern methods of gathering data and information are probably 90% of what we do. Often the situation that we find ourselves dealing with is dealt with, by and large, in the planning stage of the process. Of course, the old story is that the plan goes out the window once you start to apply it. I don't think it's always the case in the modern arena. In these days of modern intel gathering, we often know everything we need to in order to guarantee our success in 90+% of the circumstances. These days, we take away as much risk as possible from any mission. It's a bit soft, really, isn't it? Things have changed for the warrior these days. It's now a bad thing and not a noble thing to die in contact. Strange. I find this very strange. Honor and risk were why we fought in the past. It was the reason why we lived. I miss the past. Dealing with blood and horror on the field were the making of a man. Well, sorry. Perhaps I should say person. Well, what should I? It was men! It was men! Oh, and if you feel the urge to do so, please chastise me not for not being wokey-dokey doos. I do try to, but my generation of 12th century knights are just not really known for their wokedness. It's just not really us. The truth is the truth, which I can't deny. There were women who took to the field as readily as any chap. It was rare, but I'm aware that they did, and often were a bona fide part of any troop. I can also promise you that these women felt as strongly as any man did that they did it for a higher purpose, and that if that day was to be their last, it was fate, and merely their time to pass. And as long as they gave a good account of themselves, that they were deserving of that level of sacrifice, well, what more can any man or woman give than their life? And when I think of my own case, I think of the wise words of a wise woman. Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? A little too ironic. It made them a worthy human. They were willing to risk and maybe give their life for something more than their own life was worth. As warriors, we suffered and understood that the value of a person was his or her willingness to test themselves with keen-edged steel against another person. I miss those days when we would just go and fight. We knew very little in some cases about our enemy. Maybe numbers and maybe the field of war, and more often than not, nothing. We just walked in. We would adapt to the situation we found. Sort of. And we would fight. These days we have to consider the others who are involved in these things. You have to be careful with others' lives when taking on a job. In the past, if they were under your command, that was enough. They'd be willing to give all, everything. These days, if people die, you have to deal with the consequences of that. It really wasn't the same in my day. Really wasn't. Primarily for me, the fallout from that's a hell of a lot of paperwork, as I tend to be behind a mask of secrecy. But for those that have to deal with the public and the media, and the families, of course, of those who have died, I suppose, it can be heart-rending. And actually, career-ending. In recent years, we've much more to consider for our soldiers and agents. If they survive the contact, then we have to evaluate their mental health. We have to deal with a thing called PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Wow. I don't know if we had it in our day or not. Suppose we probably did. But speaking as a leader of men who went through very similar traumas, I can tell you for sure, those of us in leadership positions, we didn't give a shit. Actually, they probably don't today either. Sorry, not PC, I know, but I find it difficult to swallow as a man of the 12th century. My true sensibilities are still of that era. I suppose anyone who had their head screwed on right in those days had PTSD. And if they didn't, they must have been fucking mad. I need to get my head around this modern world, I know I do. But it seems to me that somebody should really expect to get a little fucked up mentally if they choose a job as a soldier. I'd actually worry if they didn't get PTSD. That brings you into the realm of the psychopath. Though I should say they're pretty useful in a bloody fight. The old psychopath, that is. I can understand getting PTSD in other spheres of work. The caring and rescue industries, for instance. But if you train as a fighter, then I suppose you're putting yourself in harm's way. And if you're the sort of person who employs anyone to do those jobs, then you set them up for death or trauma. Sorry, I know. I'm old and ranting once again. The treatment in my day for PTSD was to drink and give thanks to God, who would absolve us of any sins. Then we drank some more to calm the voices, to rid us of our nightmares, and finally send us into a fitful sleep. People expected and experienced horrors, and that was okay to everyone in my day. To survive them made you bloody happy, to be quite frank. Although on reflection, most of my fellows were dead before they were 40. Either by the sword or by their own hand. 40. People die. Soldiers die. All my friends eventually die. I do not. You get the point. It's not death, but survival that is my trauma. My curse. For an immortal being such as myself, being killed is just a bit sore. It's short-lived. Short-lived. Sorry about the pun. What an utterly comical description of death. Many times I've been tapped on the shoulder by the Grim Reaper himself and told in resolute terms to fuck off back, Simon. In that bloody voice of his filled with the tolling of church bells and overwhelming disappointment. I'm sure he'll get his way one day. Anyway, the longer the short of this rant of sorts is, we didn't have to be careful with our losses in the past, and that loss in these days of the modern Western military is a rare thing for the so-called goodies. Another factor in my over-preparedness is that I'd once been just a knight. Not that that was a just thing. I was a tank of medieval warfare, but I only had the kit I had. I will not list it because I've no doubt you know what a knight had worked with. You have to be a bright type to appreciate these tales we tell. So patronizing you with simple things like what a knight wore, it just isn't appropriate. Over the centuries, I've learned, and with that experience, I've built a vast arsenal of tools and weapons that can be used against any of a myriad of comers, as it were. When a situation was realized and the intel came in, I could select the correct things for the job. I could select the correct tools from out of, well, tons of items. And yes, tons would be an accurate description of the amount of catalogued things that I've fought the forces of evil with? No, not evil. Just fought the forces that I've had to fight. They haven't actually always been evil, if I'm brutally honest. Although that term is somewhat arbitrary anyway, so who's to say? And that had been why I'd taken too many things this day, and as a result, fallen flat on my face. I didn't know what I'd have to fight, so I tried to take all of everything that I've learnt was effective. A human can't be doing that. Not even an immortal one. After falling over and being laughed at by Vaunt, I had considered getting the wheelbarrow from the garden shed, but that did seem a little ridiculous even to me. A battle wheelbarrow. Well, such a thing exists, but it requires scythes to be added to the wheels. So how could I whittle this down? Choose what I need. After another 10 tense minutes, I settled on the items for my journey. The Mossberg shotty and the relevant ammunition. The iron filings and my short sword and arming sword. I left all else. Perhaps I could step back through the hole in space and time if required. Maybe multiple times. Who knew? I then prepared myself mentally, the way I always do. I reached for my hip flask and emptied a good glug of the hot, biting spirit into my welcoming mouth. Oh, that's good. I sighed, with the divinity of the taste. Vaunt watched me with an element of bored confusion. I offered her the flask, but she shook her head and offered me a face of disgust at its contents, which made me smile. "Not for you, old girl?" I asked her. She shook her head and folded her arms. I shrugged my shoulders and helped myself to her portion. That's the ticket. Bit of Dutch courage. Funny saying that, Vaunt. I say it a lot, but I've got absolutely no understanding of its relevance, I told the young woman. She shrugged and frowned in bemusement. I put the hip flask away and smiled. Here we go. I turned to Vaunt and she signed, "Ready yet?" and she nodded. I then bowed to her and directed her to the portal. "Ladies first, Vaunt." I was always the gentleman. I lifted my head and looked at the werecat. She looked back at me with a smile and shook her head in refusal. You don't want to go first, then?" I asked her. I was being a little hopeful. She shook her head again and directed me to the portal in the air with a simple look. Okay then. I suppose I'll take bloody point then, I said to her, again hoping she might change her mind actually. She nodded and smiled, pointed at me, then at the hole in the air, and signed, "Start walking." Right then, I said, patting myself down very deliberately. At the end of the check, I looked at her just once more. Now, are you sure? I don't want to get in the way of you having your fun here, old girl. This time her response was again sign language, but it was a little overemphasized. She raised her arm and hand, and then her middle finger. Okay, I said as I strolled to the portal. No need for that. I'm on my way.
Narrator, Vaunt. Yes, I am mute, but only when it comes to being in human form. I'm quite a chatty creature as a cat or a catkin. That's what we refer to ourselves as, catkin, not werecats. That were thing is for animals, not for the gods we are. All cats are gods and have nothing to do with those flea-bitten, furry werewolf things. Yuck. Can you imagine being dog-like? Anyway, this is why you hear me. That is why I am being read by the narrator, because I can't speak. I know that should be obvious, but I have to allow for the lack of intelligence in you so-called Homo sapiens, the thinking ape. Yeah, right. I tolerate the professor. That is as close as we cat can get to love. I believe anyway. I love him. Not in that way. I'm not into bestiality. I mean, I've tolerated him now for a couple of decades and let him live with me in his home. As long as he follows the rules, he can stay. As long as he feeds me and gives me that credit card thing and stuff, well, and doesn't mess my house up too much, I'll allow him to stay. In fact, he's recently spent a lot of time away and it's been wonderful. That's when I like humans the best, when they are not evident.
The last couple of hours had been very exciting, followed by very dull. The professor was testing my patience, to be honest. I mean, he wastes so much time. I was thinking of going and getting the squirt gun to teach him some manners. He hates that, especially when he's wearing his quality clothing. His look is his look is so yucky, so uncat-like. I mean, he's clean and well maintained, but his choice of clothing is so last century it hurts. He does not dress nostalgically or even with an irony either. He wears it because
I have a certain class, my dear.
he had finally got himself to a state of readiness. A massive pile of stuff sat on the floor in the middle of my beautifully polished Egyptian marbled floored hall. If he'd scratched that, then, well, it wasn't worth considering. He'd been put out of the house for at least a few days. There had been a funny moment where he'd fallen on his face. These humans can be quite entertaining at times. They are usually dull, but seeing him trapped on his belly like a little mousie under a paw was funny. I mean, I'd not tried to stop him from putting all that equipment and junk on his body because I knew that it would end up with me laughing. I love laughing at these little silly creatures when they try, bless them. Now all I wanted was to go hunting for more prey. I wanted to play. He'd offered me the opportunity to go first through the hole in the air. I had very politely declined this offer. Did he think that I was mental? I was not going to die. I only had 5 lives left. Yeah, the 9 lives thing follows us as werecats like cats. It's been quite useful, to be honest. He had finally approached the portal. We had no idea where it would open, but I assumed that it would be where the cloaked figure things came from. At the portal mouth, the professor paused and took out his arming sword from his scabbard. I could see him preparing himself now, building his bravery to enter the magical doorway. Come on, for cat's sake. Oh, God, I wish I could shout. He paused and looked at the sword, carefully weighing it in his hand, and then shook his head carefully, replacing it in his scabbard at his waist. Oh, for the sake of the kittens, get on with it. He slowly extracted the big, bangy gun thing off his back and held that in his hands. It seemed to please him much more than the sword because he smiled as he slid something back and forth on it and it clicked. I don't know much about guns apart from that they are, well, cheating. Again, there was a brief moment of mental consideration as he stared at the portal, and then he quickly popped his head into it and out of it again. His head was still whole and it smiled, giving me a brief look. It winked, and then, oh, come on, I thought, and pushed him. I couldn't wait any longer. His face suddenly was full of shock.
Bloody hell!
He shouted as he was swallowed by the gateway. What could I do? I must have pushed him a little hard, but we would have been here forever, for cat's sake. I could not see the results of my actions and heard nothing. There was just silence. Simon, you better not be. Oh shit, what have I done?
It's okay, old girl. I'm okay. I must have misstepped there or something. Fell over again. God, what a clumsy old bugger I am.
A reassuring sentence from the other side.
Goodness me. This place is a little dismal. But I gather we're in a building in Phaeton.
I was confused. How did he know he was in Phaeton? If he was in a dismal, dark, dungeony place, how did he know it was Phaeton?
Yes, it's definitely Phaeton.
He repeated.
Yes, definitely. I can see the pub from here. Come on, old girl. If we get our skates on and sort this hoo-ha out, we might make it in for last orders and a pickled egg.
Foxglove. Who the fuck do they think that they are? Who the fuck do they think they are dealing with? They have just made me destroy a good part of this factory's inventory. Arrgh! This type of unit is difficult to gain. It takes a lot of effort and time to collect them, bring them to the facilities, and generally blah, blah, blah. So destroying them is not acceptable. So then making me do such an unacceptable thing is unacceptable. The changelings had managed to get the disaster that Will and Fenrir had caused under control. They reported that some 54 of the beliefs units had been destroyed. No, totally fucking annihilated. Right, let's deal with this shit. I looked at this gorgeous man in the bubble of protection. The beauty of this was that nothing could get out, but everything could get in. It was so beautifully unfair. I waved over one of the dark shrouded figures and turned to it. It was Gregor, but who could tell these things apart? I want you to burn him, I said out loud enough for all present to hear. I want him to burn, I repeated, turning to the man in the chair. I want to see that beauty destroyed. I want him to writhe in agony. I want to see the suffering and let him learn that he cannot stop me, ignore me, or refuse me anything. I want him to burn almost to death, and then I want to watch him recover because, well, we all know he will. And that will be as painful as the burning. This was so exciting. I was going to train this powerful puppy to heal.
Bring it, you bitch,
said the shadowy wolf soul, standing now at the edge of my bubble. I flew to within an inch of its nose and smiled at it.
Whoa, wait a minute, Fen. Let's not be too hasty about this, mate. You don't have to go through the burning and all that shit, do you? So let's not.
Said Will, stuck in his chair. I lifted my hand and clicked my fingers. Gregor sent a blast of magical fire from his fingertips. It surrounded me, but it only felt like sitting in a warm sun. I had too much magical protection to fall for something as simple as a non-accidental blast from a fucking changeling. I didn't take my eyes off the seat at the center of the bubble and saw flames licking at its occupant, who instantly started yelling, screaming, and shaking. He tried to flinch back, but was held firm by his restraints. Oh, the horror! His clothes flashed into fire and melted on his skin, followed by his hair. He actually looked at his flaming chest. His skin shrunk back from the burning blast as though a liquid in it started to char. Oh, how he screamed and shouted. He panicked and rattled around in his bindings until he just started to stop moving. But this could take, it took a good 10 minutes at the very least. His body just eventually relaxed, slumping under the flames. The bastard better not be dead. I clicked my fingers again, and the blast stopped. I watched the flames licking at the mess that was now in the bubble, in the blackened steel chair. What the hell would you call him now? He wasn't so beautiful anymore, but oh, fuck me, it was perfect. The thrill of power, oh, the excitement. Oh, excuse me. Oh, wait a fucking minute. That changeling just tried to kill me. I turned, but now there were 5 fairies flittering in flight. I mean, how fucking ridiculous. 4 of them pointed at one of the party. That must be the changeling. I turned and looked at it, right in the eye. This was gonna be a great example for the others. A great moment of education. I turned to the 4 fairies and smiled at them. Their faces were now twisted in a vindictive, beautiful sort of evil. They were excited about the punishment I was gonna deal out to this stupid fucking creature. I looked at the thing that had tried to kill me and smiled at it. I had tried to kneel in the air and beg for forgiveness and all that kind of crap. I shook my head and lifted my hand towards it. The fake fairy closed its eyes and turned its face from mine, ready for the horror, as I once again clicked my fingers. 3 of the snitching fairies fell from the air, dead as a doorknob. The 4th checked themselves over, patting themselves down, looking shocked. The 5th fairy opened its eyes to see that it was still alive. I just laughed. My focus was now beginning to return to the bubble. He was already recovering. His breath was wet and raspy. It must have been hard to breathe through smoke and heat-damaged lungs. I mean, you could even see them. They were charred and kind of like a black pudding. That's what they resembled most. It just looked really weird. Oh, but the pain, the agony he must be feeling. How wonderful! Suffer, you fucking little bastard! Suffer! And remember, I did this to you, and I can do it whenever I want. A wet scream from a damaged larynx turned into a healthy scream from a healthy voice box. He was recovering. But, well, I was gonna do it again. Gregor! Again!
The Professor. Bloody hell! I seemed to have tripped and fallen through the portal that was before me. A combat roll to a firing position with the Mossberg shotgun lifted and do my 4-corner sweep of the room. Where the bloody hell am I? I'm on an ancient stone floor that's covered in detritus. Bones, scraps of cloth, and what seem like rotting rushes of straw. The room itself is quite large and has a vaulted ceiling. Stone walls surround me with a barred window at one end and a door at the other. The air is thick, humid, stale, and filled with the clinging scent of damp stone and old decay. The hairs rise on the back of my neck as I sense the amount of magic that's been undertaken in here recently. Through the window I see what appears to be a temperate evening. I remember Faunt, with all my checks done. It's okay, old girl. I'm okay. I must have misstepped there or something. Fell over again. God, what a clumsy old bugger I am. I say, I'm hoping she can hear me. I lower the barrel of the shotgun and wander to the window carefully to see if I can work out our location. I touch the windowsill, covered in the dead of a battle between spiders and flies. Yuck. Then I see, just outside the window, a mix of peculiar creatures wandering the streets of what would seem to be a small 1920s village. I recognize this place, I think. Goodness me, this place is a little dismal. But I gather we're in a building in Phaeton. I called back in the hope that the werecat could hear. I noticed next to the window a pile of bones. Those were not human, and a mix of various things. That's not so reassuring, is it? Yes, it's definitely Phaeton. Yes, definitely. I can see the pub from here. Come on, old girl. If we get our skates on and sort this hoo-ha out, we might make it in for last orders and a pickled egg. The werecat stepped through the portal. She was already hyper-aware, and I didn't want to disturb her while she was at work. Her senses were far better than mine, so allowing her to do her own sweep would be an outcome of quality. After the young woman did her thing, I looked at her. She nodded her approval, then signaled that there were two outside the door. I think modern sign language didn't have the signs for what those two things were, just that there were two. The door was a proper Eldrith thing. The wood was ancient and hard like stone. I rather liked it, actually. I went to the door and moved my left hand to the ring-like door handle. Vaunt stepped in between me and the door and shook her head, gently pushing me back, as 6-inch claws extended smoothly from her fingers. She nodded at me with a big smile, gripped the iron ring, and leapt through. I waited a moment, heard the kerfuffle of conflict outside the door, and ran through to give her some aid, raising the barrel of the Mossberg as I passed through the door. What I beheld was utterly bewildering. There were 3 fighting Vaunts. I pointed the shotgun at them and tried to work out who was who, but it was utterly impossible to tell. Each woman seemed to be fighting each woman evenly. Oh bloody hell. Changelings. One body was thrown across the room. They should have ended up in a heap against the floor, but instead, after doing some complicated gymnastics in the air, she landed gently on her feet, her back touching the wall. That Vaunt looked at me with pleading eyes. "Shoot them," she said, pointing at the 2 continuing combatants. I looked her in the eye and smiled. I lifted the Mossberg, pointed it at her head, and I fired. That head was liquidized by the shot and iron filings. That sprayed a patch of brain and bone on the far wall. I was right. It was a changeling, the remains of which formed a dark puddle on the floor. "That was a fundamental mistake right there," I told it. "Vaunt doesn't talk." At the sound of the gunshot, the 2 other fighters separated. They were very equally matched. Well, I suppose that's bloody obvious. I mean, they were the exact same thing after all. They were now staring at each other in a way that only cats can, and tried to catch their breath. They seemed to pay me no attention as they circled one another, hissing and posturing like little moggies, looking for an opening, looking to intimidate each other. I lifted the shotgun, choosing the Vaunt to my right. It just felt up. Then I shrugged, switched the aim to the other young woman and fired. Again, the blast blew Vaunt off her feet, and she landed on the ground where she, thankfully, dissolved into a black, oil-like puddle of ooze. I turned to the remaining Vaunt, who was now somewhat animated with her body language. You could say she was shouting in sign. "How did you know?" she asked at idiosyncratically high speed in BSL. I shrugged my shoulders. "Well, I didn't," I honestly told her. She gave me more sign language about her feelings about this. She really wasn't very happy. I could tell by the amount of single and double-fingered gestures. "Calm down, girl. Come on, calm down." It took a while, but she managed to get herself under control. "If I got it wrong, and just for the record, I didn't, but if I'd got it wrong, and you'd very sadly lost your life, well, at least I know you've got 5 more left, do you not, if my counting's correct? I smiled and slid the fore-end to load another shell in the chamber. Now, my girl, Pip-Pip, let's press on and do some righteous smiting.